Pradal Saray, a Cambodian blood sport in which fighters use every part of their body to attack. From face-pounding punches to bone-shattering kicks, brutal knees, elbow strikes, even grappling. In this ancient Khmer boxing style, the roundhouse kick is called coup charm. The key to this move is kick speed and kick placement. Powered by the rotation of the hips and the strongest muscles in the body, the quadriceps, the wider and further the foot travels from the center of its axis, the more speed and power it picks up. At the point of contact, the kick is traveling 25 miles per hour and can impart 550 pounds of force, more than enough to cause a knockout or concussion. Delivered to the neck, it can fracture the cervical vertebrae. Another old-school Khmer boxing move still popular today is this punch called Tupuk Kong Sadam. Similar to the right hook in boxing, the move begins with the fighter stepping diagonally towards his opponent. He then twists his hips, shifting his weight forward and catapulting his fist toward his target. Finally, the fist is rotated 90 degrees so that the palm is face down at impact. The rotation of the torso is the basis for the strike's power. Because the torso has an effective mass far greater than the arms, its rotation can impart up to 400% more force to the target. And the last-minute rotation of the wrist can magnify that force even more. Traditional Khmer fighting also employs a variety of wrestling moves, such as this takedown called Oob Claw. The move begins from the clinch, locking your hands behind your opponent's upper back and squeezing tight. You arch your back and lift your opponent off the ground. The chin is then dug into the opponent's sternum, and the locked hands are then dropped to the lower back and pulled sharply inward. This forces your opponent underneath your body weight and eventually to the ground. Locking the hands puts you in control of your opponent's center of mass, which in turn negatively affects his conditional stability. Dropping the hands behind the lower back and driving your chin into his chest further disturbs his center of mass and makes resistance from this position nearly impossible. In Pradal Saray, more knockouts come by way of elbow than any other strike. Knockouts such as this elbow slash. The first step is to close the distance and block an opponent's attack with the outside hand. Then, you step in and slash the elbow back and forth across the opponent's face. The first elbow strike can accelerate to a speed of 25 miles per hour in less than a quarter of a second. Less than a third of a second later, the initial strike is followed by another equally devastating shot. By employing the bony tip of the elbow, these strikes deliver a double dose of injury-producing energy. Another fierce Pradal Saray move is demonstrated in this brutal flying knee and elbow combination. Charging at full speed, you explode into the air and drive the spear that is the knee into your opponent's solar plexus. Then, as the opponent buckles forward, you slam your elbow into the crown of their skull. By propelling your body into the air, you effectively become a human missile, hurling your entire body mass into your opponent's gut. The force created by the body's forward momentum is partially absorbed by your opponent, which can knock the wind right out of him, or even crack a rib. But the coup de grace is the elbow chop. Pradal Saray, an art that dates back centuries, is making a strong comeback, and any fighter who masters brutal strikes and techniques such as these can become a real-life human weapon.
Eskrima, a martial art native to the Philippines, it's endured a long and violent history. Yet only in the last few decades has it caught on as a worldwide sport. The basis of Eskrima is stick work, which uses a system of checks and counterattacks such as this offensive strike called Pangilog. In this move, the Escrimador blocks his opponent's thrust, and then thrusts his own stick up and over his opponent's. With the elbow locked, the opponent's forearm becomes a lever and his elbow a fulcrum. Any force applied to his wrist is more than doubled by the mechanical advantage of leverage. By jerking hard on the arm, you can easily hyperextend the elbow. Defensive moves are equally important to Eskrima fights, and this counterattack called the Labai is no exception. To properly execute the move, an Escrimador checks his man, then locks his opponent's left elbow over his right arm, using his own momentum and a thrust of his legs to slam his opponent to the ground. Labai works on a concept called the couple. Basically, it's two levers linked at a single fulcrum, the elbow lock. And it doubles the foot-pounds of torque you can generate when compared to a single arm lock. There's more than enough force to flip an opponent to the mat, or dislocate his elbow. An additional deadly weapon in stick fighting is the disarm. This move begins when an Eskrima grabs his opponent's attacking arm. He then strikes his opponent hard across the midsection before disarming him with a wrist strike. Then, finishing him with a good blow to the head. By using the twisting motion of the torso to drive the strike, the business end of a hardwood fighting stick can quickly accelerate to more than 25 miles per hour. Oftentimes in fights, an Eskrima loses the use of his stick or knife and needs an empty-handed technique powerful enough to take down his opponent. With this simple yet deadly move called Baliag Pamali, the Eskrima wraps his own forearm between the attacker's neck and upper arm, then uses the weight of his body and gravity to force his opponent to the ground. By bringing your weight down fast, this move could easily leave your opponent paralyzed or dead. One of Eskrima's most dangerous moves, whether it's practiced with a knife, a stick, or hand-to-hand, is Palamud. As the attacker moves in with his weapon hand, the Eskrima blocks the attack, then sidesteps to his left and takes control of his opponent's arm at the elbow. He then throws two quick strikes to the arm and head. It's enough to stun, but probably not enough to cause severe injury. But replace the hand with a weapon, a stick or knife, as you would in combat, and this could become a kill shot. Pangilog, Labai, Baliag Pamali, and Palamut. These moves only scratch the surface of a martial art that dates back centuries. But with these moves mastered, a fighter is well on his way to becoming an Eskrima, a bona fide human weapon. Though the word judo literally means the gentle way, watching these guys, it seems anything but. To win in judo, you either throw your opponent to the ground, or force him to submit with arm-breaking joint locks, or deadly chokeholds. Kicks and punches are illegal, but that doesn't mean judo doesn't hurt. One of judo's best-known throws is the uchimata. To execute it, a judoka grabs an opponent and pulls, off-balancing him and giving him a forward momentum. Then, he twists his hips and inserts his thigh beneath his opponent's center of gravity. His hip now becomes a fulcrum and his leg a lever, just like a crowbar. The trick is having your leg in just the right place. It's just physics. If you're just an inch off the placement of your thigh and hip, the amount of energy needed to throw an opponent can more than double. But performed correctly, uchimata requires almost no energy, yet it can deliver up to 5,000 pounds of force. About like falling from the top of a 7-foot ladder. If it weren't for the mat, a throw like uchimata would be enough to cause serious injury, or even paralysis. Getting dominant position is critical to securing the Okuri Irijimi choke in judo. Once you're positioned behind your opponent, you roll forward using your momentum, multiplied by the leverage of your leg, to bring him to his back. Then, wrap your legs around his body, forcing his arm upwards while your hand pulls his gi across his neck. The collar of the gi reduces the flow of blood to the brain to a trickle, and ends the match. Hold this move for about 10 seconds and a fighter will black out. Hold it just a little bit longer and he's dead. Another effective move in judo is the sacrifice throw. Falling backwards as your opponent charges pulls your opponent off balance. Then you drive one leg into his midsection to guide his momentum, lifting his center of gravity up and over and hurling him to the mat. The sacrifice throw is a simple lesson in the conservation of energy. The stronger the opponent attacks, the further he gets thrown. It works like a catapult where your opponent's momentum supplies the counterweight. The faster he's going, the further he's going to fly, and the harder he's going to land. There are lots of ways to get your opponent into position for the Jujigatame armbar, but the most dynamic is to grab both his wrists and fall backwards. Then use your weight and the force of gravity to pull your opponent to you, catching him with your legs and slamming into the mat, while keeping his elbow isolated at your hips and his wrist at your chest. By bending the elbow across the fulcrum of your hips, you're subjecting the weak joint to the leverage of two strong forces, the pull of your thighs on his shoulder and your hands on his wrist. As little as 1,000 pounds of force can be enough to destroy the elbow. The leverage of the armbar can supply much more than that. The Uchimata throw, the Okuri Irijimi chokehold, the sacrifice throw, and the Jujigatame armbar. These are the moves of a judo human weapon.
The term Kung Fu was traditionally used to describe any great achievement or skill, but nowadays, Kung Fu refers to any of the nearly 400 martial arts that have originated in China, including the style of Wire Fu, the skill that enables Kung Fu movie stars to leap from tall buildings and hold kicks in midair. To execute the basic Wire Fu kick, the fighter uses his left leg to deflect the opponent's strike. There's no opposing object to push against, so all the energy of the move must come from the momentum of the leap and the acceleration of the kick. The snapping motion of the lower leg functions much like a coiled spring. When unleashed, the kick reaches impact speeds of 20 miles per hour and delivers up to 400 pounds of force to the opponent's chest. Another Kung Fu style often showcased in the movies is Wing Chun. This method is known for its quick, close-quarter strikes, such as the powerful Wing Chun punch. With your elbows tucked in behind your fist, the energy of each punch is maximized, and because the punch is delivered to your opponent's core along a center line, the more directly that force is transmitted to his body. Combine that with high punch frequency, and the effect is similar to that of continually slamming a battering ram against a door. No matter how strong, it can only sustain so many blows before it collapses. But no style of Kung Fu is as brutal as Sanda, and this highly refined system is the basis of the fighting style used by the 600,000 members of the People's Armed Police. This is the rear leg front kick. Officers are trained to use this kick in hijacking situations when firearms can't be used. The kick is all about speed. The further the foot travels, the greater its acceleration, and the more dangerous a weapon it becomes. Powered by the muscles of the hip flexor and the quadriceps, by the time your foot reaches your opponent's throat, it's traveling nearly 40 miles per hour. That type of speed, coupled with the density of the foot, yields over 1,000 pounds of force, enough to puncture the Adam's apple and crush your windpipe. Another move essential to any Sanda fight is this takedown, which works much like a round kick defense. As your opponent launches a kick, you step in and grab the leg, trapping it between your forearm and torso. Wrapping up his striking leg at the upper thigh places your opponent in what's called conditional stability. If he remains stationary, he could technically maintain his balance indefinitely. But by driving him backward and initiating a sweep of his other leg, you've added two destabilizing factors, and the loose center of gravity simply cannot hold. These are merely a few moves of a fighting style more than 15 centuries old. And even after all this time, Kung Fu remains one of the world's most deadly martial arts. It's the ultimate fighting sport, mixed martial arts. In just over a decade, this hybrid fighting form has evolved from an underground blood sport into a worldwide phenomenon. With just under 24,000 professionals in 2,500 leagues around the world, MMA has surpassed boxing and pro wrestling in popularity. Since most MMA fights start on their feet, but end on the ground, the double leg takedown is the perfect move to jumpstart your training. The fighter shoots off his lead leg, making contact with his opponent's midsection and wrapping his arms around his upper thighs. The fighter then uses the upward thrust of the hips to lift his opponent into the air. The key to the double is to hit your opponent below his ribcage, which knocks him off his center of gravity. Wrapping your arms around his legs prevents him from regaining it. In order to stay on his feet, a fighter uses a technique called the sprawl. To execute the sprawl, the fighter uses the forward momentum of his opponent against him. Then he leans in, locks his hips, and slides his feet backwards. At the same time, he pushes down on his opponent's back and shoulders with his forearms, keeping his legs out of his opponent's reach. Coupled with the downward thrust of your forearms, he's now supporting your entire upper body with the back of his neck and head, which leaves him face down on the mat, vulnerable to any number of attacks. For fighters comfortable with kicking, the spinning back leg kick is a key MMA move. When executing the spinning back kick, the fighter steps across his body and pivots 180 degrees on his lead leg. At the same time, he throws his head over his opposite shoulder. The kicking leg is then thrust backward, aiming at the solar plexus. Once the fight moves to the ground, MMA fighters resort to submissions and pins. A popular choke is the triangle choke. You initiate the choke by encircling your opponent's head with your right leg and crossing your left leg over the ankle, trapping your opponent's head and arm into a locked position. Finally, the fighter locks his hands behind his opponent's head and pulls, shutting off the carotid arteries. Another submission move is the armbar. Operating from the guard position, the fighter uses his legs for leverage and control. But instead of using the leg lock as a fulcrum for choking out the opponent, his inside arm is leveraged against your upper leg or hip. Grabbing the trapped arm, you then flip your leg over your opponent's face and hyperextend the arm. It's just a matter of seconds before your opponent will tap out. The double leg takedown, the sprawl, the spinning back kick, the triangle choke, and the armbar. These are but a few of the essential moves of an MMA human weapon. Muay Thai, the science of 8 limbs. Known as the science of 8 limbs, Muay Thai uses almost the entire body as a weapon. Trained to use their fists like Western boxers, Muay Thai fighters also rely on bone-crushing kicks and 2 strikes almost unique to Muay Thai: the knee and the elbow. This combination of attacks makes Muay Thai a uniquely dangerous martial art. Kick. The kick is a fundamental strike in Muay Thai. Like the jab in Western boxing, the kick is the long-range weapon of the sport. Power angle kick. The kick's power comes from the torque generated by the rotation of the hips. It's the same principle that cracks a whip. Turning the hips just a few degrees forces the foot to travel a much greater distance, and creates a lot of speed as it does. The longer the leg and quicker the rotation, the faster the kick. And unlike karate, Muay Thai fighters are also taught to strike with the hard bone of the shin. A Muay Thai kick generates roughly the same force as a baseball bat, enough to crack a rib or a leg. Elbow. Human bones can resist 40 times more stress than concrete, and unlike most strikes that land with some combination of flesh and bone, the elbow is almost pure bone. Elbow strike. Basically, it works like the point of a knife. All the force is magnified by being concentrated in a small, hard area. Even if the elbow doesn't deliver a knockout, it will almost always leave a nasty cut, and oftentimes end a fight. Knee strike. Getting in close neutralizes the opponent's weapon advantage. Then, in the clinch, we bring the power of the knee to bear. Unlike the kick, which relies on rotation to create power, the knee gets its power from leverage. Pulling our opponent down as we drive the knee up can deliver up to 2.5 tons of force, enough to lift a car. Hanuman. It's not the arms, but the legs that drive our fists. Like a piston, the explosive power of the legs is capable of generating hundreds of pounds of force, all to a very vulnerable area, the soft underside of the opponent's jaw. Flying knee. Like the Hanuman move, the flying knee relies on the explosive power of the legs, but rather than spread the power of our blow over 2 fists, it concentrates it in the spear point of the knee and combines it with the force of gravity.
It's the equivalent of hitting our opponent in the chest with a sledgehammer. So, there you have it, the 6 main kicks and strikes of Muay Thai. When combined with precision and power, these moves can turn any Muay Thai fighter into the ultimate human weapon. Pankration. A mixed martial art so old, it can be traced back to the Olympics of ancient Greece. Translated as all powers, Pankration means exactly that. Anything goes. With the unique combination of kicks, takedowns, throws, and joint locks, a pancratiast is equipped to force his opponent into submission. These techniques may be thousands of years old.
In an acronym that translates as self-defense without weapons, Sambo is an amalgamation of fighting styles. It employs everything from karate-style kicks and Judo-style takedowns to the bone-jarring folk wrestling of the Russian steppes. The leg sweep is a move that takes your opponent to the ground. The move begins by dodging the initial assault and forcefully grabbing the opponent's wrist with one hand. Then, a quick strike to the head with the other hand throws the opponent off balance. This allows for a quick leg sweep, combined with a pull down on the collarbone and a violent takedown. Once on the ground, the fighter pins his knee to the attacker's chest, all the while keeping tight control of the wrist. One of Sambo's most effective kicks is the side kick. The move begins by using your planted leg as a stabilizing platform. From there, you can explode your striking leg out like a piston and into one of the most vulnerable regions of an opponent's body, the rib cage. But more than just imparting stunning force to your opponent's rib cage, the side kick allows a fighter to check his opponent, keeping him at a safe distance, unable to shoot in for a takedown. One of Sambo's best submission holds is the calf crush. To execute the calf crush, a fighter wheels in front of his opponent, threads his leg through and across the back of his adversary's knee. He then grabs the ankle for leverage and flips his opponent onto his back and cranks down on the bent, isolated leg for greater torque and control. Sambo's most agile move is the scissor takedown. It begins by hooking your arm under your opponent's and clamping down on his sleeve for control. The knee is then kicked up and the leg splays out across the opponent's chest. You then rotate your hips, swing your other leg around his backside, and sweep his legs from behind. The downward force exerted on his gi pulls your opponent across his tipping point. Along with your body weight, you generate enough instability in your opponent to drive his body to the mat, like a child tossing around a rag doll. One of Sambo's most impressive throws is the hip throw. It begins by cross-grabbing an opponent's sleeve under the armpit, stepping in with one foot between his legs, and grabbing the back of his belt. Then, with a jump and a quick twist with your feet, you bend forward and back your hips underneath your opponent's. To finish the move, you lean forward, bring your feet together, and flip him over your hip, slamming him hard to the mat. The leg sweep, the side kick, the calf crush, the scissor takedown, and the hip throw. These are 5 essential moves of a Sambo human weapon.
The word Savate translates literally as old shoe, and today it's the only competitive kickboxing sport in the world where contestants wear boots. In a Savate match, Savateurs use powerful combinations of kicks and punches to attack their opponent. Most referees try to stop bouts before a fighter is knocked unconscious, but the speed at which these guys move can make this almost impossible. One of Savate's earliest kicks is the fouette whip kick. First, the hips pivot on the front leg, forming a solid whip handle. Then, the back leg's knee is bent upwards and projected towards the center line of the opponent. At the last second, the foot is snapped over the knee and into your opponent's head. This roundhouse kick is designed for maximum impact to the head. It doesn't just carry enough force to break an opponent's nose. It can drive the nose bone back up into the brain. Another powerful Savate kick is the chasse basse. To execute, the fighter raises his leg and then pistons his foot into the lower leg of his opponent, hitting him with the hardest part of his boot, the heel. This impact won't just knock an opponent down. The force is enough to permanently damage his kneecap. Combo attacks play a vital role in Savate. One effective combo is the pointe-à-fouet direct visage. You use your fist to draw your opponent off balance. Then, as he lowers his guard, you fire the point of your foot between his 9th and 10th rib. Mastering the leg sweep is crucial. The key to setting up the sweep is the aggressive punches. These get your opponent moving backwards. And as he does, you step behind him, hooking the top part of your foot against the back of his ankle. Then another punch or hard push, while the leg sweeps from behind, and down he goes. Another effective combo in Savate is the jab, kick, cross, or direct fouette direct. Cocking his arms like a pistol, a fighter drives the hardest bones in the hand, the knuckles, straight into his opponent's face. The fighter then drives the tip of his toe into his opponent's midsection. The opponent still reeling, the coup de grace is a powerful cross to the weakest point of the skull, the temple, delivering up to 2,000 pounds of force. The whip kick, the chasse basse, the pointe au foie, the leg sweep, and the jab kick cross combo. These are the moves of a Savate, human weapon.